Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello, we're back. It's been a minute since I've been here with you all, so excited to share a new topic and share the space with a new face today. Sean Murphy is here with me, career coach. As we know, top of the beginning of it, I just want to give people a few minutes. So if you're just trickling in, welcome, welcome. We're excited to have you. And I know some folks are transferring over from other meetings or other spaces. So we'll give them some time. But as usual, I just want to welcome everybody in. I always like to know what got you interested in this topic and what's bringing you into space today. So if you're already here, you got your beverage, you got your snacks and everything, let us know in the comments, like what about the topic of pivoting in life and transferable skills, and what are those questions that are coming up for you, and maybe we'll be able to answer a few of them along the way. Yeah. So as folks are continuing to trickle in, I just wanted to share some agreements for the space. It's the same two I usually hold for our talks. The first one is just to stay curious. So the ideas that we're sharing here today, we're not trying to propose a right or wrong perspective. Sean, I might be speaking for you, but I feel like as coaches, we don't typically feel like there's like one set way to do things, but we just want to make sure there is a way that feels aligned for our clients as well as ourselves when we make choices on what are the things we bring forward in our life.
Definitely.
So stay curious in terms of how that can show up for you, and also just to stay open. A lot of the topics that I bring into these talks and the folks that join me on these is part of what I call like a bigger journey, right? It's not something we're going to unpack in 60 minutes and we're going to solve, check off that box, move on to the next thing. These are usually like bigger, more knotted topics that takes a little bit to untangle, and we wanted to provide a conversation space, both sharing our personal stories, some insights from our clients as well, to help you start that untangling of your own. So, again, welcome. If you're just joining us right now, would love to know what brought you into this topic, where you're joining us from. So, feel free to leave those in the comments for us. But let's dive in. For those of you who don't know Sean, would you mind introducing yourself to everybody today?
Yeah, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Sean Murphy. As you can see on the screen, I am a career coach, and I help people transition into careers that they love. And that can come in many different forms. But essentially, it's I work with people beyond just like resumes and interviews, things like that, to really figure out like where they want to go and what are they stuck on, and how do we come up with a plan to get you there.
Hmm. Yes. And this is why I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Sean, because you're a career coach that doesn't just look at career from like the paper perspective, but a little broader lens as well, which is a space that I find some overlap with as well. So, for those of you who I hope you know me, but if not, hello, welcome again. You're like, why am I on this person's channel? My name is Betty Chan, and I am an authenticity life coach, facilitator, and speaker. And two of my favorite topics, if you can't tell one of them already, is around the topic of authenticity, and the other one is around gentle strength or gentleness. So a lot of my work is helping folks who I call code switchers. Sometimes they're first gen, sometimes they're just folks who feel like they are living between two cultures. Either it's a work culture and a home culture, or you're coming like your parents' generation and then the new generation as well. Whatever it is, those two worlds you're straddling, and you feel like you can't be yourself in either of them. So a lot of my work is how do we find and like reweave those parts of ourselves into a connected story so that we can move through the world feeling a lot more authentic. And I think when we feel authentic about how we show up, what we talk about, the choices we make, we naturally live a much more confident life as well. So that's the work I do. And sometimes that does overlap the topic we're covering today, which is around career. But we have a little bit of a life spin on it as well, because when Sean and I were first talking about this, we're like, oh, we met like I call it two lifetimes ago. Right? Like two lifetimes ago. Sean and I actually used to be project managers in the same organization. And we've gone through some fun times together in that org as well. But since then, we've kind of split paths, done our own thing, and then we kind of reconnected as friends and realized like, hey, we're both on this coaching path now, and just talking to each other as humans and wondering like, So what did you carry forward? How was that transition from going to project manager to a product manager as well and going into the coaching world? What did we take with us? And then we also hit on this topic of like, what did we have to consciously let go of? What was that unlearning we had to do? Because so much of the mindset and the tactics and strategies that gave us success as project managers actually didn't always serve us in this new lane of life as well. So we wanted to share a few examples of those, and hopefully that would be enlightening for everyone joining. Be like, well, what about my skills? What are my skills I can take forward? And also, what are the ones that we can consciously let go of too? Anything to add there, Sean?
No, I think you've captured most of it pretty well. And if anything else comes up, I'll be like, oh wait, one more thing.
Yes, one more thing, one more thing. We can definitely do that. I have a feeling we're gonna have a few of those today.
Probably.
Yeah, and for folks listening, like if you have that one more thing, like that question as well, like feel free to drop in the comments. There is a bit of a lag, so we'll try. If we can't get to the question live, we will definitely try to get back to you in the comments as well. But yeah, this is a topic: transferable skills, a jargon. I love unpacking jargon, so let's get into it. Um, but what I guess, Sean, maybe we start from the beginning. I mean, we introduce ourselves as coaches, and we just shared with everyone that we met each other a few lifetimes ago. What was your life before becoming a coach?
Yeah, so even before we met, I feel like I had like a couple lifetimes ago, even before that.
Hmm.
Part of what even brought me into the type of coaching I work with people on is that I've had several careers within my own career. You know, uh,
Hmm.
I've worked in schools. When I first started like working, post college, I was a bartender for years, and that really felt like something that went from like, oh, I'll do that because I know how to do it. I did it in college, and
Hmm.
everyone who moves to New York City, is trying to do
Oh
something, and
yeah.
they just need to pay bills. So that was how I was paying bills. But
Hmm.
eventually, that became where I was like, oh, I'm good at this. This could be long term, entrepreneurship. Um, Eventually, I did. Um, change gears and move on from that. And I was working in entertainment media for a long time with production, content, marketing, those kind of things. And that's around the time we met when I changed gears from then, where I was really getting more into sort of the digital technology side of things and more project
Hmm.
management. And eventually, I worked in product management for several years, where I started to have bigger shifts just in terms of like the kinds of things that I allowed myself to be open to in terms of what I was interested in and what I realized were my skills, and what I
Mm.
was willing to see as like a growth path for myself. And that was really the first time that for me I was like, oh, I can be left brained and right brained at the same time. I can be creative.
Oh
I can
yes.
be I can be business minded and creative at the same time. I don't have
Hmm.
to be one or the other. Like that was one of the things that I think held me back for a long time. It was like I I'm a creative person, and that's the only option open to me.
Yes.
But once I got
I'm
into
an
product
organized
management,
person. That's it. That's all we're
yeah,
allowed to do.
like I
Yeah.
started to get more
Yeah.
interested in sort of the business side of things, the creative side of things, um, and eventually, I was leading teams and being a people manager, and having to um, figure out how to motivate people, how to work with people on different things, and so from there, I eventually went into coaching, and on paper, like that can very easily look like, okay, this looks like a very scattered career, but for me, like every time I went to something next, it always felt like that, like this is the most logical, natural progression for
Mm.
me. Um,
Hmm.
and that's sort of how, like, eventually I was like, oh, like these are things that I've done several times, and it doesn't feel scattered to me. I was like, these are the kind of things that I can help other people with. So that's eventually, where,
Yes.
kind of things went full
Mhm.
circle, and where I am now.
Hmm. Thanks for sharing that. And I love the word scattered. I love that you brought that up because that is oftentimes the insecurity that I've had over the years about my resume and how it looks to
Hmm.
other people. And oftentimes when I'm coaching clients through any sort of career pivots or just life pivots, it's also like, well, what are people going to make of this?
Yeah.
And I find that interesting that that's usually the first question we ask when I feel like you answered something that I think is really important, which is asking, what am I making of this
Yep.
first? Like, if we don't know what the story is telling about us, how do we share that? How do we help people understand that better as well? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you do have to start with yourself, like convince yourself, like, oh yeah, like I'm doing this, it makes sense. But there is, even though I've done this many times, like there are those moments of resistance where it's like, wait a minute, like
Mm-hmm.
what am I doing here? Like how is this going to come
Yeah.
off? Um, and does it make sense? But yeah, it definitely is, that mental moment of like feeling like, does this feel scattered? But really, it's kind of like just that you're slowly drawing yourself out of particular comfort zone, but
Mm-hmm.
going towards something that is pulling you there for a reason.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that language too, like the pull and push thing, because we've talked about that. I think, I guess, I assume words, Betty. I was like fast forwarding through my brain. I was like, actually, if I look back at the different roles I've had from a professional level, I think the first thing most people would think is also like, damn, Betty, like you're all over the place as well. So I share with you in that. And I never actually sat down until very recently when I was sharing a post about um, just being in a position where like on paper I looked really good, but on the inside I felt extremely lost and unsatisfied, and recognizing that by that point in my life I've already made 5 pivots.
Yeah.
And I never actually sat down to count. I don't think counting is necessary, but just I think when I was able to do that, it gave me something like, wow, I'm very resilient in this. I'm able to reinvent myself again and again and again. And to give an example, like I graduated in '08, not a good year to graduate,
Oh,
not
no.
not fun for finding jobs at all. Thankfully, I had parents that was able to like, Betty, come home, stay with us. I'm an only child, so I hope they would do that for me. At the end of the day, I am the only baby they have. But to just like get moving and just start saving up some money, and just like working down debt and things like that, I actually ended up starting to work with my dad, who's a blueprinter. So I grew up in that blueprinting office for architects all the time. My handwriting in my journal, writing in all caps, I actually picked that up from being around the architects that were there all the
Hmm.
time. But it was really like manual labor. It didn't, like, as a college grad, it did not require a lot of mental space to do it. So I would get my job done, and I would say what felt like 60% of the day was just sitting around waiting for the next print order to come. So I actually was able to use that free time to kind of just practice for myself. I had access to Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator for the first time in my life because they had those paid
Yeah.
programs were really expensive. And I did a lot of like self-taught design, which then created a little portfolio, which then led me to my next job as a art director for a entrepreneur that went to the same college as me. So I was able to do that for 2 years in Boston. And then I decided I do, love Boston, no knock on Boston, but I'm a born and bred New
Yeah.
York girl. So
you,
I
you
was
take
like,
the New York out
I,
of me.
I, I gotta come home to New York. So decided to step away from that opportunity and be like, you know what? I feel like I have enough experience now to like go off on my own. So again, like I think in that point in my life, I did not think of that as like my first foray into
Hmm.
entrepreneurship the way I do now, but it was my
Yeah.
first time like going off and be like, I'm putting a stake in the ground for my own skills and I'm going to market myself. I'm going to manage my own projects as a designer and a front end developer. So I was able to take on freelance projects. I worked for the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, which amazing to be able to walk to work in a garden every
Yeah.
day. That was
That's a
really
nice
lovely.
commute.
So that was kind of like my third pivot. And I think doing that for about a year and a half or so, if I remember correctly, there was this deep feeling of like loneliness because I was doing everything by myself, which is something I feel sometimes now too in my
Hmm.
entrepreneurship, and something that I don't think people talk about that much, especially for solopreneurs or freelancers, like that loneliness that
Yeah, it's
comes
like
with,
that. There's
yeah,
nobody in the
going
cubicle
off.
next to you. Like, how do you
Yeah,
find connections? Definitely.
exactly. Granted, there's less trauma bonding, but I don't miss that part, but it is just kind of like you have to figure everything out on your own. You're looking to yourself for examples and so forth, in addition to the resources you would normally do. But that loneliness actually led me to talk to a few friends who then pointed me to the Apple store. So I was the girl on the sales floor running the cash wrap, selling laptops and things like that. And I really, really loved it. And it was actually through there and a combination of my my freelance design development where like one of my clients at that time asked me to do a project. I wasn't able to take it on because I was still at Apple. And then I just followed up like, hey, how did that project go? And he put me in contact with the agency owner that
Hmm.
ended up doing that project for him. And that led me to the organization where you and I worked together. And that started my tenure journey and my longest stint
Yeah.
inside of my 5 pivots of being in project management. I think at that point I did feel really scattered, right? I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going left and right over here. What am I making of this? So I gave myself a lot of pressure to stick with project management for as long as I can, even when there are moments that are really painful and like did not fit for me. Um, and just being like, okay, I'm going to climb the ladder version of this, like go
Yeah.
from a PM to senior PM, director PM, head up my own team globally of 30 PMs. And like, I'm still really proud of that. But I think the forcing of myself to stay on that path really created this like inner dissonance for me. And I think again, just following those feelings and following what feels true to me led me to realize that the favorite part of my day when I was the global head of project management was less about running the projects at that point. We had great projects too, but the part that kept me going on a week by week basis was actually helping my team develop as
Yeah.
human beings, as professionals, and so forth. So
Exactly.
I didn't know coaching was a thing back then. I
You
didn't
go
have
from
a
trying to
coach.
figure everything out
Yeah,
about a specific project or task to like you're like, all right, I'm helping people figure out their own things. It's
exactly. And like it felt really good to like don't just do it my way, don't just copy my way, but like let's find your magic. Let's find the way you really want to do this and helping them like feel good and feel strong and confident in that part as well. So I think when I finally connected those dots, got some coaching myself to get through some mindset hurdles of my own, it became really clear that like this is where I thrive and
yeah,
this is I don't have to explain my value, especially in a place that already understands and cherishes and values that. So here I am in my 5th pivot. Thank you, everyone, for listening to that very long saga of Betty's professional journey. But this is what I mean by like, it feels like we really had to go through multiple lifetimes to get to where we are.
yeah. It and I think it's like we've talked about before. Like it's sometimes like there's just that I'm not sure if this is like the the long term right thing, but like in the moment, it's like yeah, like this makes sense, and there's no
Mhm.
especially early on, I find a lot of people like whether they're fresh out of college or have only been in the workforce for a few years, like the there isn't really any any training or structure to think of like okay I might do
Mm.
several different things for the most
Yeah.
part like when you're in college it's like you're getting a degree and you're getting that degree
Hmm.
like with a specific focus of like this is either the very specific job that I want to get or these are the type of jobs I might get
Yeah.
and it's not always going to go that way and so oftentimes like that will be like the first triggering moment of like okay I'm not good at what I do
Yeah.
and then like you do get a job possibly doing something that is wildly different than what you feel like you've trained
Hmm.
for and then like moving on from that like immediately like brings up those old moments of like oh my god like I don't want to feel awful about like the rest of
Yeah.
my work life so it's kind of
Yes.
it's getting used to that like I can pivot I can move into different things is not like giving yourself that permission to not feel scattered is a very hard thing to do. But once you figure it out,
Mm.
you'll be able to see lots of progression from there.
Yes. And I'm hearing the difference of like a mindset that I definitely held for a long time, which is like, I don't make sense, right? Like, I don't make sense. I don't fit into anything. I don't belong into anything. Versus what you mentioned of like embracing the pivot. I like that because it sounds more like a mindset of, hey, I'm a human being that I'm meant to evolve.
Yeah,
I'm meant to change my shape over time. And how do we do it in a way that feels empowering as opposed to like we're not enough for who
yeah,
we are?
yeah.
Hmm.
That's I think at least in terms of the type of people that I've worked most with and helped in their whatever their transition might be in their career. It's usually like
Hmm.
coming to like being okay with that part is the harder part than like you know,
Yeah.
what should I put on my resume, or like how do I answer this specific question? It's very much
Mhm.
like the conversations you have with yourself in between those interviews or applications.
Yes. Yes. Definitely with ourselves. There's so much going on in here
Always,
sometimes.
always.
So true. Yeah. And the funny thing is like I think about this a lot of like as coaches we'll say the term mindset, right? We'll talk about things like being embracing like a evolution mindset and empowering mindset. But oftentimes when we're struggling as just human beings, it's not the language we're going to use, right?
Yeah,
So like the thing I hear a lot from clients and myself when I'm going through having to do any sort of pivot, it's like, I don't have the experience for this, right? So it comes under the I'm not good enough mindset. But the question I say out loud is like, ooh, I don't think I'm qualified. I don't think I have the experience for this. Um, yeah, I'm kind of curious, like Sean, how do you navigate something that question when it comes up?
in terms of uh, am I good enough to do this? Or
Like if someone comes to you and be like, I want to do this pivot, I don't think I have the experience for this. How do I go about it?
gotcha, yeah, yeah. I think that oftentimes, the the easiest way to help somebody figure out like how to do that
Hmm.
is the looking at their own career, like, and actually getting like very specific with them. Oftentimes, some of the language that I often see, like people will use a lot, like in LinkedIn bios or resumes, things like that, is it'll say like proven track record, but then
Hmm.
they don't necessarily refer to that proven track record. So it's almost like give yourself the opportunity now to like um, detail out your proven track record of like if it's
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
sometimes even like figuring new things out. I actually had a conversation recently with somebody who is like looking at potential options of going from like a governmental position that they've been working in forever, where like everything is different about that. Like the tools that you use to collaborate, the tools that you use for project management, they're pretty
Hmm.
much the same things, but you can't use like Google Suite or Microsoft Suite all the time. Like
Yeah.
they have their own very specific ones.
Yeah.
And they were having that thought of like, well, I don't have these specific skills that
Hmm.
that people are looking for. So it's like, all right, well, let's look at your you know all of your previous achievements. And one of them was like this person was previously in the military, and it's like, oh, you got a
Hmm.
marksmanship award like for shooting a gun. It's like, did you ever shoot a gun
Mm.
before you were in the military? No. It's like, but you
No.
figured you
Yeah.
figured that out,
You
and
figured
not
that
only
out.
did you figure it out, you got really good at it.
Hmm.
And it's like those are kind of things where it's like granted, like shooting a gun is not necessarily going to be the transferable skill, but figuring out like this is something that I figured out, like doing new things, being open to new
Yeah.
things. Those are
Yeah.
often like where it's you have to come up with that proven track record of not thinking so linearly like how a resume might be, but where it's like I
Hmm.
figured out new things. I was um, you know doing things that maybe were unexpected. Those are the kind of things that I
Hmm.
think for most people they'll be able to come up with specific examples in their career where it was, you know, a specific project in like where it was like nobody knows how to do this. Like, um, who can we have do this because we don't have budget to hire somebody? For me specifically, I never had the the role of like a copywriter. Like that was never my actual job title. I can't
Mm.
think of any job that I've ever had where I didn't apply copywriting. Like I was just somebody who always liked writing. Like even as a
Yeah.
bartender, like I worked in a basement bar. There was a chalkboard that I needed to like try to bring people down. So it's like we have a fireplace, we have air conditioning, things like that, where it's like
Yeah.
small things where it's like I used that skill set.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the I think you have to start really high level as opposed to like what's going to go on my resume.
Yeah. That's so interesting because you're reminding me of like, yes, the where our mind trips us up is like, well, I wasn't hired for this. I wasn't hired to be a copywriter. I wasn't hired to be a signage designer. Like, does that mean I'm not qualified for it? The other thing that a lot of people kind of think about is like, oh, well, I never got the training for it and I don't know how to use the technical software, etc. But it's like if you've had the space to practice it, then there's always that opportunity that you can continue to develop your expertise in something, right? So I think most similar when you mentioned the copywriting, I'm like, yeah, I don't think I was ever formally trained to do copywriting. I was never hired for it. But now, even as just a business owner, I have to do it all the time. I have
Yeah.
to articulate my points all the time. And like thinking about what are the skills I do have that I can lean on for that, which is, capturing and simplifying things is something I'm really good at. Like taking a bunch of different ideas and being able to capture as one thing. And I can do it from a writing standpoint as
Yeah.
well. So helping folks understand, like, just because you weren't hired for it, just because you weren't officially trained for it, it does not mean the skill doesn't exist, right? It does. If you want to refine it more, you can. There's
Mhm.
different ways to do that, but it doesn't mean you don't have that experience at all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And one other thing I like to um, sort of help people use like as a mental exercise to kind of like think about that is
Mhm.
very often in our 9 to 5 type careers, um, if if the person we report into is leaving, whether it's like they left for a new job or there was a reorg, something like that, there's usually always some sort of gap that needs to be filled, where it's like
Mm.
this person did 40 hours of work per week and uh, it needs to be filled either long term or short term.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, that's like the perfect example of like, yeah, I don't have that job, but if it wasn't like we're going to fill this position, like you could very very much be like, okay, I can do these specific things to fill that gap.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
even if it's not like things that are both you and your manager have done that exact thing because it's just like the fundamental training or skill in what your discipline might be. But if it's like these
Hmm.
are things that I haven't had to do on my own, you've been working in a place where you are seeing other people do that. Like you have at least
Hmm.
that building block of like, this is how, not necessarily how it should be done, but like this is how it could be done. So you can approach that as either I will do it like exactly how this other person did it and
Hmm.
use that as the model, or you can be like, I hated how that person did it. I will do everything the opposite way as my mental model. So there are
Yeah.
those things where like if you are concerned that you don't have some of that experience, like think of kind of like temporarily firing your own boss in your head so that it's like, all right, let me start
I'm like, well,
let me
what I do?
let
Yeah.
me start doing those things. If I had to fill a gap and prove to myself, I can figure out how to do the things that I haven't yet had to do.
Yeah. Okay. I like it because it's cheeky. So I do want to pose this question for folks who are listening to us. Like, drop in the comments. I'd love to hear what people are coming up with. If you get to mentally fire your boss for a day, what would you do to lean in for that? Right. Like, I'd love to hear from folks what that is because I never considered asking myself that question. There was so much like deference for the authority figures in my life when I was working in the 9 to 5 that
Mhm.
yeah, I would just discount it. I'm like, "Oh, someone else is doing it better,
Yeah,
so therefore I can't do it myself because this person is like they've taken up all the expert space in that area already." So I like that you that's a helpful way to think about giving yourself the permission to think about how you can lean in without discounting yourself. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Mm.
And, and I think sometimes like that may even be the thing where you're like, those aren't the things that I want to do, and that might be like another like
Yeah.
maybe it is time to you know diverge a
Yes.
little bit.
Pivot as opposed to forcing yourself to climb
Yeah,
with a ladder. I've done that, people. It's not always fun if that's not the destination you want for yourself.
yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, Sean, let's do a little pivot on this pivot conversation.
Okay.
We talk about transferable skills from the career and the professional standpoint, and I think another way that I usually help my clients like understand and practice their transferable skills is helping them realize it's not only for work,
Yes.
right? Like the skills that you've used at work you could use at home, the skills you use at home you can also use at work because we're whole people. We come with this whole catalog of wisdom. And I'm kind of curious, like for you, is there, how do I ask this, what's a skill you used a lot in your past career that you've remixed to help you today in some corner of your life,
Yeah.
professionally or not? Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I mean, realistically for me, like the name of my my business, the way I operate as a coach, like was very much stems from that. Whereas I took something that I learned like in my career, applied it to something in my personal life, and then realized like, oh, like I have this mental framework to kind of go back and forth between these things. And for me,
Yes.
I worked as a product manager for a long time, and in product management, if anyone is unfamiliar with it, you sort of break down really big things over the course of either a year, a month, a week, and you call that a roadmap, where it's like, all right, here's everything that we're going to work on
Mhm.
here. Um,
Mhm.
and you typically put them in what's called a sprint. So like I started like coming up with things like a personal sprint for myself. Like how do you take this really big thing?
Sean, what's a sprint?
Sprint is a predefined amount of time where you have like a specific goal that you want it.
Okay. Okay.
So it's like,
Mhm.
you know, um, for me, like when I took that transferable skills, like, okay, like how do at the time, like I was just like, I'm going to run a marathon. I was a former smoker. I was out of shape. I was overweight. And I was just like, I was like, oh, like I'm gonna go for a couple runs, like maybe I'll do this. And I want to say it was like within like a couple weeks, I was like, I'm running a marathon. Like, and I was like, that was like that big
Wow.
thing where it's like, okay, what do I then do now? So like the sprint part
Mhm.
is like the time frame, not the running, like running fast part. So for me, it was like, okay, how do I how do I make it like running for 2 minutes without like feeling like I'm
Mhm.
like keel over? So like
I don't know. Tell me. I'd like to know personally.
so for me, like that was it. It was like, all right, like how do I start by
Mm,
like running 2 blocks, 2 minutes? And like that was really like the foundational building block for me. Is
mm,
like that I learned from my career of being in product management is like, how do you take a year's worth of um, apps that you're building and features that you're like, and sort of sequence them in the right way so that you're working on the right thing,
mhm,
but also so that it's
mhm,
not just like you know, especially like if you were to think of it in a personal growth or a professional growth, where it's like, I'm going to do this big thing. Like that can't be the
mhm,
first thing you do. Like if you say,
mm.
like for me, if I'm going to run a marathon, I don't just say I'm going to go run 26 miles. Like that won't work for me. Like that was,
That hurts just to think
yeah.
about.
So it was, it was for me, that training like was over the course of I think it was like summer of 2021 where I was just like, I'm gonna do this, and more like
Yeah.
telling myself I'm gonna do this, and then it wasn't until fall of 2022 when I actually ran a marathon.
Mm,
So it was that
mhm.
I gave myself like enough runway to be like, how do I how do I do this hard thing? But
Yeah.
also like I gave
Yeah.
myself like, here's all the very specific things that I need to learn how to do. And I think
Yes.
that for me was like okay, I'm figuring out how to take a transferable skill, which is like take that really huge, like potentially overwhelming thing of like,
Big yes.
where do you
Mhm.
start first, and figuring out like,
Mhm.
okay, here's where you start first, like, which
Mhm.
was how I then like started realizing like, like how do I double down on this in my actual job at the time, and then like
Mhm.
those same models to how do I start a business, how do I approach working with clients where it's like, hey, I
Mhm.
want to get a new job. It's like, okay, well, getting a new job, like you don't just say tomorrow I'm going to get a new job. Like what are the
Mhm.
smaller things so that like it feels like I can do something that is achievable, but not just a task list of like
Mhm.
let me create this really big list. And
And then overwhelm myself all over again.
like going back to what you were saying, like what's a sprint? It's like, what am I doing in this specific period of time?
Yeah.
So
What's feasible here?
what am I doing today?
Mm.
What am I doing in this hour? What am I doing in, you know, over the course of
Mhm.
a month? And those
Mhm.
are those are the kind of things where like you start to realize, well, at least I started to realize that, what I went into something specifically thinking like isn't going to work out that way. So you have to figure out
Mm.
like, okay, well, what do I do differently? Like,
Yeah.
what happens
Yeah.
if I signed up for like one of the races leading up to a marathon, but I got injured? Okay, well, what do I do? Like,
Yes.
I don't
Then
just
you break down the different components of
yeah,
that and
like
then you figure it out.
start
Yeah.
start doing the things that people like always say, which I would skip, which is like stretching, strength training. Go to bed on time and don't. Um,
Yeah.
so it's kind of, for me specifically, it was like taking those kind of things that was like a very almost like templatized, but not in like a kind of
Mm-hmm.
gimmicky, like, gimmicky way where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
here's things that I do every single day, get paid for it, like
Mm-hmm.
bring this into my personal life, but not in a way where it's like, I feel like I'm like taking my work into my life.
Oh, at home. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Because that can definitely feel weighty and like not so fun.
Yeah.
And
What
I
about
guess
you?
especially for those of us who work a lot of hours already.
What was something that you found was the best, um, or maybe not the best, but like the most impactful way of like where you're like, oh, here's how I take something that is a transferable skill to my personal life.
Yeah. I'm gonna borrow from our mutual inspiration, like our background of project management. And I realize there's so much that we do in that role that
Hmm.
because we've had to do it all the time and it comes easy to us, like I've just taken it for granted. Um, and I know how to do it intuitively. So I never bothered to like slow down and break it down into different parts and teach it to someone else as well. So one thing that I continue to lean on intuitively is just clocking scope creep. So if you're a project manager in the audience,
You were
Sean
the first
Murphy,
person who
embrace
I've ever
this.
heard say that phrase where I'm like, what are you talking about? So when I hear that
I was
phrase,
like,
I
that's
still
scope
think I'm like,
creep, that's scope
Betty,
creep.
Betty.
Yeah, so let me define that a bit. So often in project land or in product land, like exactly Sean said, like there's a sprint for a certain time, or there's a project that you want to, like there's some sort of goal, and then there's a time frame you want to do it, right? So there's a which we call a scope, like a description of what that goal is. And a lot of what we do back then as project managers is being able to break down this really, really big goal, this really, really big scope, and into the bite-sized steps, and then guide our team going from point A to point B, take that detour, come back to point D, and so forth. But something I've recognized time and again, and I'm going to say this with as much love as I can, where people overpromise things that we can do. And I'm guilty of this in my personal life too. So it's not, no judgment on that. But it tends to do that. Like we get a little optimistic, we get hopeful, we get really excited to work with this client. And then we just be like, yes, I will give you the next best thing as good as sliced bread. Like I'm going to
Hmm.
deliver to you in 2 weeks, right? So just understanding like what are you promising and what is the capacity and the resources available to you in this moment to do it. um, so the way I've actually transferred that into like a life skill is actually just seeing my productivity in a different light. So as a coach, I do, as I mentioned, the second topic I really love talking about is gentleness.
Yeah.
And that's gentleness in our productivity as well. Not to say that's not the same as not being ambitious. You can be highly ambitious and gentle at the same time, but doing it in a way where you're not burning yourself into the ground while you're trying to achieve your goals. So being honest about what your productivity is, being honest about what your capacity is, being honest about where you might need a little support in this season, but once you feel like you're set and you're practiced and things are in muscle memory, you can reevaluate and see like, okay, what do I want to change this to be? So tangibly, one thing I do, I've gotten really honest with myself that I had to unlearn the Q4 vibes. So Q4 for us was always like end of the year, client needs to spend on their money or they're going to lose their budget the next year. So for us on the project side, it's like cram everything you can do in, which is still to this day bonkers to me because you're doubling the workload while everyone is going on vacation. So you have
Yeah.
half the capacity to do it. So it's not just, that was already hard when full team was there, but then you take half the team away and then still expect excellent outcomes. I'm always just looking at people. I'm like, are we nuts over here? Like, what's going on? Right? So that's me clocking a form of like scope creep. That's us not being authentic, not being
Yeah.
honest about what we can do. And, I still have that shared goal. Oftentimes I talk to different project teams or clients when they feel a little like white knuckle, like we need to get this done. The thing I always try to bring them back to is we're in the shared goal of we want this to come to life. We want this to happen, but we don't want it to like come to life like a paper building and then it
Mhm.
falls apart in two
Exactly.
seconds. Like we want to build something sustainable and great because like your money deserves a good investment and turnaround in that case. Our team deserves some productivity that feels really good for them and they can be proud of the work that they do as well. As human beings, we just need that. Like there's no excuse for it, no reason otherwise for it. Um, so for me, like personally, I realized, okay, Q4 for a decade, that was me ramping up. But Q4, the winter months of the Northern Hemisphere, is cold as F, right? Like it's dark, the sun goes down by 4. I think I've had days where I go in the office and I don't see sunlight for like a few days on
Yeah.
end because I'm working through lunch and everything. That's a whole different topic for all of us to talk about. But I need light. I need light coming into my room. I need to be in that. And I realize I'm my best person. I'm most productive
Yep.
when I'm in a brightly lit space. I don't mean fluorescent light, I mean natural light in that case.
Exactly.
So knowing that I've as a coach now and something I help a lot of my entrepreneurs with is like giving ourselves permission to change our schedule. So when it does come to the winter months, I actually shorten all my hours in the day.
Mhm.
I work less during those months. And yes, there will be a part of me and has been for a very long time. I'm like, Betty, in your past life, you were able to crunch out twice the work in half the time, half the resources. What are you doing slowing down now? Especially with the whole like coming into New Year's resolution. Everybody might want a life coach at that time. Like, what are
Yep.
you doing slowing down in a time when everybody is picking up? And for me, I'm like, because I don't want to burn down. I want to be an excellent coach to whoever hires me. So I have to be whole as a person to show up as well. And that's been great, not just for my clients, for my business, but also just honestly, romantically with my family, being able to be present with everybody. Because let's not forget the holidays. Everyone's
Yeah.
gathering, and you're holding a whole other job during the holiday season as well. So that's been a really helpful transferable skills, like from a project manager looking at scope creep and just like helping people understand like, hey, our goals and our capacity don't match right now. Let's make some like smart decisions around that to still get us towards our goal the way we want to. And then doing that in my personal life, which is actually a lot harder because yeah, as far as the toughest boss I've ever had in my life, I probably count myself as one of them of like, are you allowed to stop working that
Exactly.
many hours in
That's
the winter months? It's like,
that mental, like,
yes,
you
yes,
gotta be
please.
tough, you gotta grind it out, and it's like
Yeah. So that's been really helpful, but it took a few years to fully give myself that permission. And it takes constant reminding myself. I'm like, hey, it's okay, Betty, if you're not so productive right now. It is the dead of winter. You know this about yourself. Maybe someone else can do it. That's fine. But we're talking about me right here.
yeah,
So again, just asking those and being aware of what fuels you and what doesn't.
yep. Yeah, you telling me that, reminds me of somebody who works in a, similar space as you, um, and I remember she once said to me, she's like, "People need to remind themselves that, especially, when you think Q4 winter months, especially being, like, anywhere, Northeast, where we are, that, before careers was a word that was used, like, when it was just humans living on, in this area,
Yes.
this was the time when people their only focus was survival. Like,
Hmm.
it's like, yes,
Hmm.
we like
Yeah.
like animals, like, you hibernate, you do less, and it's for
Hmm.
good reason so that you don't, like, like, go out and, burn out, or, do things that maybe it's not the best time to get those things done.
Hmm. Hmm. And I will share that that's hard to do, right? Like even when your brain understands it logically, there's a part of you that you might find still tries to fight and
Yeah,
resist this. And I think the other mindset that really helped me finally lean in and embrace is that just because we're slowing down outwardly, it does not mean we're slowing down internally,
yeah,
right? So like Mother Nature is a huge inspiration for me. Like, yeah, it does look like the leaves are falling off and like the rabbits are hibernating. Those I suspect sometimes the rabbits here don't hibernate. Uh, but it's doing something like it's collecting the sugars and everything it needs to do so that it can bloom well when spring comes, right? So it's that kind of hibernating, collecting your resources, getting your mind clear, and what I call marination periods. Some projects can't start without you just living and visualizing the idea for a while.
Yeah.
So like the marathon thing, you can plan out for me all day long, but I'm gonna need some marination time with
Yeah.
like, do I want to be a runner? Do
Yeah.
I want to
So
do this and so forth?
it's funny you say that, specifically with not just marathon training, but like running any like training for any sort of like distance run.
Mm.
Um, you know, there are what are called recovery runs, where it's like
Ah,
and also like recovery days. So like sometimes like
yes.
doing a recovery run is like you're not supposed to be running as fast as you can. Like and
Hmm.
like that was like one of the most illuminating things. Like when I first started, I was like, wait, like running
What?
isn't supposed to be run as fast as you can for as hard as you can and as long as you can. I was like, so like by doing
Yeah,
something
I had
very
that thought too.
methodically and slowly, like multiple times, like
Yeah.
that's actually beneficial for me. So it's
Hmm.
recovery doesn't necessarily have to be doing nothing, but
Mm.
just not doing it like at like breakneck speed all the time.
Yes, yes. And just as a word of encouragement for folks out there looking to do this pivot, doing the job interviews, you're not doing nothing, you are doing
Yeah.
something. And this is your slow and steady moment to shine when you're ready to get there. Yeah. All right. Well, Shah, we're almost at time. Maybe with as a closing question, like what's one small step that you can share with folks who are listening to us today to help them better understand and value their existing skills?
Yeah. Actually, this was something that somebody shared with me not too long ago. And I think that it works great, especially for people in these kinds of situations where they're trying to figure out like what am I set up to do next? What are my skills? Is to get out
Mhm,
of your own head, and eventually like you want to see your own value in yourself. Like um, you don't want external validation. But when it comes to like figuring
mhm,
out like what are my options, or like what am I best at, like asking the
mm,
people who know you very well is often like the most illuminating thing you can do. And not in
mhm,
like a like having them tell you things that they think that you want to hear. So I've used this a few times where you ask somebody like, tell me like what you think works best about me, or what you like best about me. Um,
mhm,
but you frame the questions in specific ways where like they're almost telling you things that are more granular, and that would be you know what do you think works best about me as a person, just like you know kind of like my sort of like heart-centered skills, so to speak, like my
mhm,
kindness, my compassion. What do you see are like my best attributes when it comes to like my brain skills, like. And
mm,
um the other one would be like, what do you think are like works best about me when it comes to like my actual career. And
mhm,
surprisingly, the when it came to like the asking people about like what about my career, like the people that you would naturally want to say like, oh, I should ask like former colleagues. We all just went through a pandemic where everyone was like locked inside, and like you were working in front of other people that you had never worked in front of for the most part.
yeah,
Like, um,
mhm,
so like think of that as like, the people who saw you on Zoom calls, like they're now suited to like give you insight into how you work. And the
mhm,
reason I think that that is like the a great starting point is because we often, when thinking about doing anything new, like we try to like analyze ourselves, um,
mhm,
and we we really overlook like what other people think about us, but like the things that people often pick up about us are the things that they struggle with. So they're going to highlight things that
mm,
likely take for granted, where it's like this comes so naturally and so easy to you.
yes,
and
yes,
and those I think are going to be the areas where you'll find insight of like this opens up a whole new frame of frame of reference for like what are transferable things for me, because you're like, oh yeah,
mhm,
I'm really good at this, and it doesn't come hard, or it's not difficult for me. It comes very easy. So those are the kind of things that you know I can do more of.
yeah, yeah. I love that. I love everything about that. I don't have a new answer for it. I think that's really great because even as a coach, I struggle with this, right? We have all these self judgments, we have all these self biases that understandably it becomes hard to see the things that we've taken for granted, right?
Yeah.
Because we take it for granted because they're easy and they're easy, which means we forget about them and we don't think about them. So, like, that's don't judge yourself for that. That happens to everybody on the planet. And if I could add one more phrasing of question that I found really helpful in one of my pivots, and I've always encouraged my clients to start here when I was like, "What do you feel like you're good at?" And they're like, they're stuck. They kind of go brain freeze and they can't answer. I'm like, okay, well, let's enlist the help of the people around you,
Yeah.
right? So from siblings to family members to friends, and if I know sometimes it's a little scary, but also like ask your managers, ask
Yeah.
your boss, ask people who are like 2 degrees away from you. Like maybe I remember someone did a lot of work with external teams. So even though they don't really have much daily contact, just like that weekly Zoom call, I'm like, ask them too, because if there's something about you that's showing up from that distance, that's a very powerful element of yours that
Yeah.
you want to lean in and double down on. So the phrasing I want to give folks is when you talk to these people, I'm like, what do you tend to come to me for? Like when
Mm.
shit hits the fan, like what do you come to me for? And sometimes if it's helpful, I'm not I'm not suggesting comparison, but sometimes comparison can be a helpful learning
Yeah.
tool if we don't get all jealousy and catfighty about it at the end of the day. But like when you talk to your manager, it's like, hey, if we're a team of directors and like when things are going tough and you think like, okay, I need to reach out to Betty versus reaching out to someone else. What's that thought that's going through your head? Like what is that thing that makes you reach out to me as opposed to someone else? Because there's something that people assess all the time subconsciously. Like, I'm going to reach out to Sean for X, Y, and Z. I'm going to reach out to Betty for X, Y, and Z. And it's not to say one person's better than the other, but there's something about your
Yeah.
personal brand, your skills, and how you show up that's already there. You're already living and breathing it. We're just discounting it. So,
Yeah.
like, lean on the help of others to be like, what do you come to me for? And yeah, be like, I love that question framing because also it helps us understand how to support each other. And I do think in the long run, we do need to understand that relationally to do our best, even in
Exactly.
any world. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Sean, for
Yeah. This has
joining
been
me
great. Thank
today
you.
on I was love walking down memory lane with you and just like getting to learn more. And I'm really excited to have a fellow PM also be a coach in this world as well. As someone who never got access to coaches growing up, like I love to see more of us
Yeah.
because I
It
do think
was,
it's
it wasn't
super
even
helpful.
something I ever like
Yeah.
could wrap my head around, like needing it, wanting it, or even like, is this something for me?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
agreed.
Yes. Well, now everyone here listening to us, if you've stayed to the end, you know two more coaches in your life. We'd love to chat. Shadow won't speak for you, but like I just love hearing what people take away. So like feel free to DM us and reach out to us. And actually speaking of that, what's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm I'm always on LinkedIn. Being in the career space, that's usually the easiest way for people to reach
Hmm.
out to me. So my name is pretty common. It's probably the most common name in Ireland and of Irish Americans. So if you want to find the right Sean Murphy, just put a dash, a hyphen before Sean Murphy, all is one, like in LinkedIn. Um,
Oh, okay, good tip.
so that's the that's the easiest way. Or you can, I mean, and if you do find my profile on LinkedIn, you can schedule time through Calendly, like 15, 20 minutes, just to get a sense of like, am I the right person to help you? What is it that you're looking to
Mhm.
figure out? And if I'm not the right person, if Betty's the right person, I'm gonna send them your way. Or so those are always free consultations. And if you really need to figure it, like just Google personal sprints, and you'll find my Substack. And um, there's
Highly recommended. It's a very, very enjoyable Substack. Thank you. And we'll also leave it in the comments as well, how best to reach out to us. And as for me, the best way nowadays, I'm a little more spotty on LinkedIn, as I alluded to in the beginning. It's been a few months. since I've been back. But a very reliable way to find me is on my website, which is heybettychan.com. I also have a generic ass name. So Betty Chan with an A, not an E, not a U, and all that. And the website's like saying hi to me, heybettychan.com. Right at the top right now, you'll be able to subscribe to my newsletter. That's kind of my jam right now, especially as I'm building out a series of workshops. I call them just like the ladder series. They're foundational skills that have really helped my clients in our one on ones. And I wanted to bring them more into the public space. So, an example is like, understanding your overwhelm cycle,
Mm,
really sitting down and mapping and understanding. I think of it as like a highway analogy. Like when we move towards overwhelm, we're like picking up speed on the highway. And how do we slow down enough to recognize what are the different stages we're going through, as well as the exit path? So I hope to do that. I hope to do like a bingo workshop. I'm in a very workshoppy mood this year.
they're
So
fun,
the newsletter.
and I think that's a great way for anyone to like get a sense of you know what somebody is like
Yeah.
is attend a workshop. Like that's the
Yes.
easiest way to
If
figure out
you're
who somebody
curious on that, that too. And if you just want to come in for the skill, that's totally fine too. That's what I intended those to be like bite-sized things you can take if you're not ready to go into more long-term coaching, to just like start marinating for yourself.
is.
Like, how does that show up for you in your life? I will be announcing those first on the newsletter and then the website as well. So feel free to follow me in those two places. And of course, I might be a little slow, but I always come back to it. So feel free to leave us any comments, any questions, like what did you find most helpful? I always encourage that, because for folks who don't have the time to watch the whole thing, the comments are kind of like crypt notes, like really quickly, like,
Yeah.
hey, I found this most helpful. So people can assess, like, okay, do I want to listen to a whole hour of this? So if there's something you found really useful, feel free to drop that in the comments. But other than that, thank you for stopping by and good luck with your pivots.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.